Amboseli, mid-morning. The rain had been steady since dawn, soaking the earth until even the hard-packed road began to ripple with shallow runoff. Near a bend, just past the acacia thickets, a ranger patrol vehicle slowed to a crawl. 10 meters ahead, the outline of a young elephant lay half-submerged in a muddy trench beside the track. Her side rose once, shallow and uneven, before settling flat again. One back leg gave a weak tremor, then stilled. Her ears were plastered against her skin, and a thin stream of rainwater trailed along her spine, collecting in the shallow curve of her shoulder. The engine was cut. For several seconds, no one moved. Then a quiet voice on the radio summoned veterinary support. No alarms, no rushing footsteps, just the soft sound of boots stepping into wet earth. Ranger Baraka approached first, holding a tarp under his arm and walking slowly with eyes lowered, counting each breath the calf took. From her size and the faint markings behind her ears, she was under 3 years old. Her left tusk had only just broken through, no herd nearby, no other tracks in the mud, no movement except the shallow pulsing at the base of her trunk. He knelt beside her and rested one hand lightly near her ribs. Her body was cold to the touch. Thin skin clung to the shape of bone beneath, and the sharp line of her hip jutted upward like a warning. When Baraka reached gently toward her temple, her eye opened halfway. Glazed, unfocused, but not empty. She did not flinch. She did not make a sound. Rain gathered in the folds of her ears, dripping steadily to the ground. Around them, the air smelled of soaked dust and dung, of wind carrying the faint musk of distant elephants. But there were no answering calls, no trumpets or low rumbles, no sign of a mother or siblings waiting just out of view. If she had been left, it was not recent, and if she had wandered too long. Baraka pulled the tarp gently over her head, shielding her eyes from the glare as the clouds began to thin above. The waterline beside her body had begun to rise. If she stayed here through another downpour, she could drown where she lay. And if she tried to stand with no strength, her legs might break beneath her. The stakes were simple now. If she moved, she could collapse completely. If she stayed, her lungs could fill with water. "She's fading," Baraka whispered. It was not meant to be heard. But one of the younger rangers behind him nodded grimly. Another call was made, not for transport yet, but for the stretcher and saline packs. There was still a chance, but only if her body could be warmed, lifted, kept dry, and hydrated within the next 2 hours. A low moan escaped from her chest as one front leg flexed and failed to lift her. Her trunk slid forward and landed in a shallow puddle. Baraka didn't move. He placed his hand gently beside the curve of her head. Palm down on the soil, not touching her now, just waiting. The rain slowed to a mist. A swallow flitted past, low to the ground, wings brushing the surface of a growing pool. Beside the elephant, a line of ants detoured around her bulk and continued toward a cluster of roots. Life did not pause, but here, in this moment, the weight of it gathered. Somewhere in the distance, a low call echoed, deep and wide, like the shape of a grown matriarch's voice. The calf's ear lifted slightly, then dropped again. If they were too late, she would not survive the hour. If they moved too fast, she could go into shock, and if no herd returned, she would face recovery alone. Baraka waited with her, the air still holding the smell of rain. Baraka stepped carefully around the edge of the trench, his boots sinking slightly into the loosened earth. The rain had eased to a fine mist, brushing across his shoulders as he knelt again beside the calf. Her eye had closed since his last check, but the rise and fall of her chest still stirred shallow ripples in the puddle beneath. A strand of grass stuck to her side. The breath from her trunk came slower now and with less force. The waterlogged mud had soaked into the creases of her skin, dulling her natural gray to a mottled, sallow brown. She did not react when he placed 2 fingers gently along her jawline. He whispered a quiet word, not for her, but for the team gathering behind him. Another ranger appeared with a medical pack, moving only when signaled. The calf's ribs pressed sharply against the loose skin along her flank. Baraka didn't need to say it aloud. She hadn't eaten in days. Her ears drooped heavily, nearly folded under their own weight. A few fresh abrasions dotted her legs, likely from falling against the roadside scrub as she weakened. But there were no major wounds, no blood, no indication of a predator encounter. This was a slow unraveling. Exhaustion, separation, exposure. The kind of end that came quietly. He motioned to have the tarp replaced with a dry field blanket, and it was done without a word. When he laid it across the curve of her head, the fabric clung gently to her skin, dimming the world around her. For the first time, her trunk shifted. Not a lift, not a grasp, just a faint recoil from the sudden warmth. Baraka rested his hand flat against the ground again, this time closer. She didn't move away. They marked the perimeter in 4 quiet paces, setting faint lines in the soil to keep vehicles from edging too close. The space around her became a circle of silence, broken only by the breath of men watching for signs. Another ranger knelt nearby and read out her temperature. Too low. If her core didn't warm soon, her organs could begin shutting down. They estimated she had 4, maybe 5 hours. That was the best-case window. The calf gave a slow exhale, and the moisture from her breath condensed against the side of the blanket. Baraka noted the sound, deeper than before, but strained. Her nostrils flared once, then slackened. He looked toward the east, where the line of trees curved back toward the deeper bushland. No sign of large movement, no answering calls, no matriarch standing watch. The chance of a family return was growing thinner by the hour. If she'd been rejected due to illness or weakness, they would not come back, and if she'd fallen behind, they could be kilometers away by now. "What do we do if she tries to rise?" one ranger asked softly. Baraka didn't answer right away. He watched the calf's side move again, weaker this time, like a hill shrinking under rain. "If she stands, we keep her standing," he said. "If she stumbles, we catch her." He returned to her side and placed the edge of his sleeve against her mouth. The air from her trunk barely lifted the fabric. They had begun rehydration through misting, laying wet cloth along her gums to encourage internal cooling. Every 10 minutes, a ranger replaced it. If she refused water when offered directly, they'd move to slow IVs. But any sudden movement, forced lifting, stretchering too soon, touching the wrong spot, could send her into a spiral. 1 hour passed, then 2. The mist thickened again into light rain. Her legs remained limp. Her eyes closed, but each breath continued. A stubborn rhythm against the quiet stakes that framed the moment. If her breathing slowed any further, she would not recover. If they lifted her too soon, she could go into a rest. But if they waited too long, the trench would flood again. Baraka wiped the water from his own eyes and looked down at the calf. The blanket had darkened with rain, but beneath it, her ear gave a small twitch. It was not strength, but it was still movement, and that was enough, for now. The storm broke in slow waves, shifting from a low mist to scattered sheets of rain that moved across the plain like drifting breath. The earth around the trench had softened further, turning the runoff into a slow-moving stream that lapped against the calf's hind legs. A distant roll of thunder passed without urgency, but the light above had dimmed enough that the shadows beneath the trees disappeared. The radios crackled once, and minutes later, the veterinary vehicle arrived from the west gate, tires cutting deep into the roadside mud. 2 figures stepped out without speaking, pulling equipment from the back, already gloved and ready. Baraka met them with a nod and stepped aside. One of the vets, Dr. Marithi, tall, quiet, mid-40s, moved to the calf's side and crouched low. His assistant, Loma, prepared a saline pack and began recording temperature and breath rate. No one raised their voices. No one called out instructions. The rhythm was practiced, quiet and precise. The calf did not stir. Her eyelids were slightly open now, just enough to see the dull whites of her eyes. Her trunk had shifted a few inches since the last check, now curled lightly near her own leg, as if folded there by instinct alone. The vet slid his fingers under the edge of her ear and held them there. The skin was still cold, still dry despite the rain. He spoke softly. Dehydrated, likely infection. She hasn't urinated in some time. He reached for a damp cloth and began clearing a patch of skin along her shoulder. There was a faint scent of rot near the base of the trunk. Not decay, but the early signs of a bacterial buildup. They would need to administer antibiotics, but only after her heart rate stabilized. If they moved too fast, the treatment could tip her system into collapse. If they waited, the infection could take her before nightfall. Another team arrived from the field post, carrying the portable stretcher. It was a wide canvas sling with 4 reinforced handles, designed for calves under 5 years. Ropes were laid out beside it, coiled and clean. They would not use restraints, only a cradle lift. The goal was to move her in one attempt. No jostling, no second tries. The vet slid a small IV catheter into a vein near the rear leg and attached a slow drip. The saline was warmed against his chest before use. If her core temperature dipped any lower, even hydration could trigger shock. Baraka watched the fluid drip, measured, consistent. Every drop a gamble between life and system failure. They spread the canvas stretcher near her side, flattening it to match the contour of the ground. 2 rangers took position at the far end while the vet checked for reflexes in her limbs. The front leg twitched faintly. The rear did not. Still no vocalization. No panic. Only the hollow silence of exhaustion, of a body too far gone to resist. If she moves, hold her trunk flat, Dr. Murithi said, but don't force it, just keep it clear of her legs. Loma adjusted the drip. Baraka moved to the calf's front and placed one hand lightly against her forehead, applying only the pressure of reassurance. The calf inhaled through her trunk with a sound like air brushing cloth. Thin, dry, unsure. A thread of mucus clung to her lip and dripped into the soil. They slid the stretcher slowly beneath her, inch by inch, rolling her gently as needed to align her body. She groaned once, not loudly, but from somewhere deep within her chest, like a buried chord struck too hard. Her eyes did not open. Her ears did not lift. But her breath came faster now, more shallow. If she's lifted before the saline takes effect, her heart could give out, the vet warned. We wait 15 more minutes, no less. The rain continued to fall in a light, steady pattern. Around the group, the grass bowed under the weight of moisture. The light was fading faster now, early for the hour. One of the rangers whispered, "Almost there, girl," without looking up. If they got her off the ground and into the medical enclosure, her odds would improve. If she remained here through another storm, she wouldn't make the night. If she rejected hydration, she could begin shutting down within the hour. The rope handles were gripped. The stretcher was ready. And still the air held its breath. The ropes tightened in unison. 4 rangers stood spaced around the sling, each with a firm grip on the reinforced handles, waiting for Baraka's signal. The rain had lightened to a soft mist again, and the air around them held the muted hush that follows hours of water. Dr. Murithi gave a final nod and stepped aside. There was no countdown, no shout, only a low breath and the smooth, even lift of weight leaving earth. The calf's body rose slowly, her legs hanging without resistance. Hooves muddy and curled inward, her head tilted slightly to one side, cradled by the sling's curve. Her eyes remained open, cloudy but alert. The wet blanket still clung to her face and Baraka gently adjusted it, folding it back just enough to see the shape of her ear. It fluttered once, not from muscle but from the light breeze that followed the storm's tail. Every step had to be precise. They moved as one, each footfall deliberate, adjusting their pace to the slight sway of her weight. Beneath them, the trench was now half filled with water. Had they waited longer, the soft bank might have collapsed altogether. Every movement from this point forward would carry risk. If the sling shifted, she could fall. If her spine twisted, even slightly, the damage could become permanent. But if they hesitated now, her body might not withstand another cold hour on the ground. A plastic sheet had been laid between the vehicle and the shelter's opening, marking a dry path across the clearing. The medical tent itself was narrow but tall enough for the stretcher, with low canvas walls that held warmth and filtered light. A shallow bed of hay and dry cloth had been spread across the floor. Inside, a generator buzzed quietly, powering a heat lamp already trained toward the center. The sling reached the edge, and Baraka steadied the front end while Loma adjusted the canvas folds beneath her back. The team eased downward, 1 inch at a time, until her body met the soft bed. There was a pause, breath held, eyes watching, and then a slow exhale from the calf's trunk. It was not loud, not urgent, but it moved the hay at her mouth. Dr. Murithi checked her vitals again while the rest stepped outside to rinse the mud from their hands. Her heart rate remained low but steady. Her limbs remained still. There was no muscle reaction yet, no sign of movement beyond breath. But her eye shifted once toward the ceiling, tracking the light. That single motion was enough to continue. A second IV line was introduced, this one for broad-spectrum antibiotics. The drip was slower now, calibrated to her adjusted body temperature. A faint hum of warmth began to build inside the shelter, seeping into her skin through layers of cloth. Baraka sat just beyond the cot's edge, resting on a folded blanket, his posture quiet but alert. The calf shifted slightly, enough for her shoulder to settle into the straw. Her trunk rose half a hand's height, then fell across her chest like a vine folding into itself. The rain had stopped completely. Outside the tent, water rolled gently from the edges of leaves, collecting into a quiet rhythm across the underbrush. A bird called twice from somewhere in the taller trees, the first sign of returning sound. The sky had softened into a pale wash, neither blue nor gray, just open. If her vitals remained stable for the next 4 hours, they could begin controlled feeding. If she showed muscle reaction in her limbs, movement could begin within a day. But if her temperature dropped again, or the infection spread faster than the medication, she could still slip into failure by morning. Baraka reached forward and touched the blanket near her trunk, not to wake her, only to reassure. Her breathing answered, faint but timed. The danger had not passed, but for the first time since the morning, she was no longer sinking. Her weight rested fully on something that could hold her. A soft gust stirred the tent's edge, brushing against the heat rising from inside. The calf's eye closed slowly. Not sleep, not surrender, just stillness returned. Before the first light reached the treetops, the shelter was already quiet with waiting. The storm had passed completely in the night, leaving behind only the soft dripping of leaves and the faint scent of clean mud. Inside the tent, the calf lay as she had been placed. Stretched across straw and canvas, the blanket folded loosely along her back. Her body had warmed. Her breathing had deepened, but she had not yet moved. Ranger Baraka remained nearby, seated with his back to one of the tent's inner poles, eyes half closed but alert. A kettle steamed slowly behind him, untouched. Dr. Murithi had checked her vitals once before dawn. The numbers weren't strong, but they were no longer falling. A nurse had left a shallow bowl of glucose-mixed mash just inside the space, untouched. All night the air had carried the same question. Would she rise? And if so, would her legs remember how? Her trunk stirred first, inching slightly across the straw before falling still again. A moment later, one ear shifted upward, folding back softly against her shoulder as though something in the air had changed. Then, without warning, a low, rough groan emerged from her chest. Not sharp, but guttural, rising in a hoarse exhale that echoed against the canvas wall. Baraka straightened, not quickly, not alarmed. He waited, her front legs bent forward, knees creaking as they tucked beneath her chest. Then her head lifted, slow, deliberate, the blanket slipping down into the straw. One of her back legs slid slightly on the damp cloth, trembled and held. Inch by inch, she pressed her weight up from the floor, shaking but coordinated. Her sides heaved. Her eyes remained half-lidded. But she stood. The entire tent seemed to pause, the creak of straw under her weight, the low hum of wind outside. Even the water bowl remained perfectly still. Baraka rose and took 2 steps forward, hands loose at his sides. The calf's ears twitched. Her legs bowed slightly inward, unsure. But they did not fold. And her eyes, dulled by days of stillness, found the edge of the open flap ahead. Dr. Murithi stepped in from behind the curtain. "She's on her feet," he said softly. No one clapped. No one moved toward her. The moment required nothing more than stillness. Baraka whispered, "That's a fighter," barely audible, more breathed than spoken. The calf took 1 step, then paused. Her legs quivered again, not from fear, but from unfamiliar effort. A slight stagger rocked her body and her trunk swung low to balance her weight. She righted herself without aid. If she could walk, her muscle memory could return. If she remained standing through the hour, her circulation would improve. And if she took even 1 more step, they would begin monitored movement outside the tent within the day. Her second step was firmer, the third more even. She moved no farther than the center of the shelter, but her ears had lifted now, cupping faint sounds from the tree line. Something in the distance had drawn her attention. Not a sound humans could hear, but something remembered. The team held their place. No encouragement was offered. No guiding hands reached out. This was hers. The warmth from the rising sun began to filter through the pale canvas walls. Shadows shifted in long, quiet arcs across the ground. The calf turned slightly in place, trunk extended, and drew a long breath toward the open air. She did not collapse. She did not groan again. She simply stood, breathing, adjusting to the weight of her own body held upright again. A scar beneath her shoulder caught the morning light. Thin, pale, nearly healed. Baraka took it in, then looked away. Outside, birds began calling from the upper branches, and the distant sound of other elephants, faint and hard to place, rose across the plain like a low drum roll under the sky. If she walked tomorrow, she could rejoin the protected herd. If she ate by herself, she could stay beyond the treatment window, and if her infection held, the worst had passed. A breeze touched the edge of the tent, lifting a corner of the curtain just enough to let in the gold of morning. The calf turned her head toward it and stilled. Her ears stayed open, her legs did not move, but she did not fall again. 2 mornings passed beneath a dry sky. The calf remained within the recovery pen, venturing only a few steps at a time, her movement cautious but steadier with each hour. The wound beneath her shoulder no longer seeped. Her breathing had slowed to a quiet rhythm, no longer strained. The small herd in the nearby holding paddock called out occasionally, a low exchange of sound that came more from routine than longing. She never answered, but when they called, she lifted her head. By the 3rd morning, Baraka walked the outer fence line alone. The soil had hardened again under the sun, but near the northeastern edge, where the grasses dipped toward a shallow gully, something unusual caught his eye. Impressions in the dirt. Not hoofed, not small. Large. Rounded. Clear. The distance between them suggested an adult. He crouched beside the print and traced the edge with his fingers. The soil inside was darker than the surrounding crust, slightly damp, as if pressed within the last 12 hours. He followed the tracks in a wide arc around the enclosure. No signs of feeding, no dung, no tree damage, just a slow, deliberate circle. And then they turned away. No smaller prints followed behind. No lingering marks. Whoever had come had not stayed long. Baraka returned to the tent and stood quietly at the entrance. The calf stood alone near the feeding trough, her ears flicking at insects, trunk coiling near the edge of a dry basin. When he stepped forward, she shifted her weight but did not retreat. Her eyes followed his hands as he opened the side gate. He led her gently out into the inner clearing, where grass grew longer and the scent of old elephant trails lingered beneath the trees. She walked beside him now, without touch or call. Her steps remained slow, deliberate, but no longer wavered. When they reached the fence's eastern corner, he stopped. She kept walking, her trunk lifted high, swinging wide and then stilling in the air. She held it there for several seconds, not searching, not lost, but sensing. Then she lowered it carefully and pressed the tip to the base of the fence post. Her breath deepened. The wind shifted. She moved again, walking along the boundary line until she reached the corner where the print had been found. She stopped without instruction. Her trunk moved across the soil, unhurried, following the invisible trail left by the one who had come before. She made no sound, no movement toward panic or excitement, but her ears lifted fully now, facing forward, holding still. She lingered over one spot where the grass had been bent low. A single patch smelled faintly of skin and dust. Baraka did not speak. He waited. She turned slowly, walking back toward him, but paused once more at the edge. Her trunk rose again, higher this time, curling slightly as it tasted the breeze. She remained like that, still and listening. If the female returned again, they would prepare a reintroduction. If the tracks appeared a second time, it would not be coincidence. But if this was a passing, a one-time circle of memory, they could not force a reunion. The calf stepped closer to the fence and touched it lightly with her forehead. Then, with the same calm she had shown all morning, she turned away and walked back toward the enclosure. Behind her, the trees swayed gently in the breeze. The prints at the fence line began to fade beneath shifting light. The space where the two had nearly met held nothing but stillness now, and the faint rising warmth of dust. By late afternoon, the light had taken on a deeper gold, brushing low across the field as shadows lengthened and cooled. The calf had returned to the far corner of her enclosure 3 times that day, pausing each visit with her trunk raised toward the same stretch of trees. She no longer seemed restless, only expectant, her body calm, her steps measured. Baraka had watched from a distance, noting the repetition. It wasn't routine. It was direction. Something had shifted. At the edge of the open ground, past the acacia line, a large shape emerged. No sound, no warning, just stillness. An elephant, older, broad-shouldered with skin darkened by age and dust, stood just beyond the perimeter fence. She did not move, did not call. Her ears remained open, motionless. The space between them stretched 50 meters wide and entirely silent. The calf froze mid-step. Her ears lifted but did not flick. Her trunk dropped slowly to the earth, then rose again, curving slightly toward the figure. She took 2 steps forward, then stopped. No hesitation, no alarm. Only the alert, deliberate posture of recognition. Baraka moved slowly toward the gate. His eyes were locked not on the adult, but on the calf's face, the way her body leaned ever so slightly toward the shape, the way her tail stilled instead of twitching. This wasn't fear. It wasn't even confusion. It was memory sorting itself into place. The adult female rumbled once, low and deep, a sound that barely reached the ground. It was not a call, not an instruction. Just a sound of presence. The calf answered by stepping forward again, this time without pause. Her trunk extended as far as the fence would allow, reaching between the horizontal rails, swinging gently in the air. Baraka stopped at the latch. The decision ahead was not simple. If this was not her mother, the calf could be rejected again, physically, even violently. If it was her mother, there was still risk. Her immune system remained fragile, her muscles still rebuilding. And if she crossed that boundary and was not accepted, they might never get her close again. But the signs were clear. Her stillness, her orientation, the rumble from the adult, and the lack of warning posture. Baraka knelt beside the outer rail and unlatched the lower section, easing it down into the grass. The metal made a dull click as it locked flat. The calf stepped over it. Her movement was not fast. There was no rush. She moved with the certainty of something remembered but unspoken. As she reached the halfway point, the older elephant lifted her trunk and gently swept it down through the air in greeting. They met at the midpoint, their foreheads nearly touching, their trunks sliding across one another's sides in a silent exchange of scent. Neither animal cried out. There was no display, only the quiet rhythm of breath shared between them. The older female moved her feet, repositioning herself slightly so the calf could stand beneath her chin. She did, then stayed. If this bond held, she would not need to return to the pen. If this female was hers, the calf's recovery would shift from isolation to reintegration, a change that could alter every outcome ahead. But if they moved too fast, the calf could still collapse from exertion. If stress returned, her progress could reverse. The sun dipped lower. Baraka remained kneeling beside the gate. He didn't call out. He didn't move forward. The wind brushed the tall grass sideways, revealing the two figures, small and large, standing shoulder to shoulder as if no time had passed between them. The sky above them burned a quiet amber. The earth beneath stayed still. Neither left, neither led. They simply remained in the same place as the light began to fade. The light thinned over the plains, folding gently into the roots of the trees. A hush had settled across the clearing, not silent but expectant, like something breathing just beneath the surface. The calf stood pressed lightly against the older female's shoulder, their bodies aligned as if the days apart had never stretched between them. They had remained that way since the moment of meeting. No calls, no movement, just a quiet proximity held with purpose. Baraka had not raised the fence. He knew the choice would come without signal. The calf had made every decision since the first groan that lifted her from straw. Now, it was not his to hurry. She shifted her weight once, adjusting the position of her front legs. The older elephant responded in kind, stepping forward with the slow ease of one who had walked this land for decades. The calf followed. They moved without tension. No backward glance from the adult, no call from the team. The two shapes passed through the outer clearing in rhythm, side by side, not touching but never straying far, the grass bent beneath their weight, brushing their legs with a soft hush. It was not a reintroduction. It was a resumption. Baraka stayed at the gate, hands folded loosely in front of him. He watched each step as if marking time, not measuring distance but holding the rhythm of something long interrupted. The herd would likely be farther west, near the shaded bend where the river curled behind the ridge. If she could make it there on foot, it would mark the first full test of her recovery. If she tired too soon, they would track her and intervene. But if she reached them unaided, she would not need rescue again. The calf paused once at the edge of the clearing. The older elephant did not stop, only slowed. The calf turned her head slightly, not fully, not dramatically, and her eyes found Baraka, just for a moment. Then she turned back and followed. There were no words from the team, no radio calls. The camp behind them had faded into stillness. Baraka lowered his eyes briefly, then looked again. The elephants were already at the first rise. their outlines softened by the dusk. If the night remained clear, the tracks would hold. If the terrain remained dry, they could monitor her movement with ease. But if she disappeared into the thicket beyond the second ridge and no signs came after, they would not pursue unless needed. Some returns were not meant to be measured. A breeze moved through the grass, low and wide, stirring the sound of seed heads brushing each other. The last golden light filtered through the canopy ahead, catching the backs of their legs as they entered the line of trees. Neither turned again. Baraka stood alone by the gate, the metal rails open behind him. The light dimmed to a quiet gray-blue, and the dust along the path began to settle. The field did not change. The world did not announce itself. But where there had once been only stillness, there was now a memory of motion. And somewhere beyond the trees, two shapes disappeared into the fold of the wild.